You're listening to Full Circle Weekly News of the open source community presented by Full Circle Magazine. These articles are compiled by Eric the Unready, and I'm your host, Moss Bliss. This is episode 394, covering week 47, November 18th to 24th, 2024. Linus Torvalds released Linux kernel 6.12. The most notable changes include the ability to enable real-time mode, sked_x for creating CPU schedulers via eBPF, QR code output in emergency conditions, device memory TCP mechanism, sked_deadline server resource reservation mechanism, improved EEVDF task scheduler, and IPE module for setting integrity policies. The new version includes 14,607 fixes from 2,167 developers. About 45% of all changes presented in 6.12 are related to device drivers, about 12% of changes are related to updating code specific to hardware architectures, 13% are related to the network stack, 6% are related to file systems, and 3% are related to internal kernel subsystems. GhostBSD 24.10.1 has been published based on FreeBSD 14 stable and offering the Mate user environment. There is also a community edition of GhostBSD with XFCE. GhostBSD uses a ZFS file system by default. Both live mode and installation on a hard drive are supported using the proprietary ginstall installer written in Python. The Latin American Free Software Foundation has published the Linux Libre 6.12 GNU kernel, cleared of firmware and driver elements containing non-free components or code sections whose scope of application is limited by the manufacturer. In addition, Linux Libre disables the kernel's functions for loading external non-free components that are not included in the kernel distribution and removes references to the use of non-free components from the documentation. To clean the kernel from non-free parts, the Linux Libre project has created a universal shell script that contains thousands of patterns for detecting binary inserts and eliminating false positives. Ready-made patches created using the above-mentioned script are also available for download. The Linux Libre kernel is recommended for use in distributions that meet the Free Software Foundation's criteria for building completely free GNU/Linux distributions. Linux Libre is used in distributions such as Dragora Linux, Trisquel, Dynebolic, GNU-Sense, Parabola, Musix, and Kongoni. Executable object code was detected in the source code of one of the drivers, generated from unpublished source code, and embedded in the form of a sequence of hexadecimal numbers. The driver is not explicitly named, but judging by the changes, the affected code is part of the AMD GPU driver. The Arch Linux developers have announced a decision to transfer all source code of components used to form packages such as package build, .install, and .desktop files to the ZeroBSD license, essentially transferring them to the public domain. Previously, the source code of package build scripts in Arch Linux was distributed without specifying a license, which led to uncertainty, allowed different interpretations of the possibility of their use, and created problems when wanting to use them in other projects with a strict licensing policy. Arch Linux contributors will start receiving email notifications listing their contributions. If a developer agrees to have their work distributed under the ZeroBSD license, they can simply ignore the mail, but if they have objections, they should reply and discuss possible options. Canonical has published the results of an evaluation of the impact of profile-guided optimization on the performance of code profiling, which allows generating more optimal code based on the analysis of program execution features. The conclusion was that using PGO allowed a 5 to 7% reduction of the CPU load by and reduced the build time. During the experiment, the performance of building OpenSSL, GDB, Emacs, and Python 3.12 packages was measured in the QEMU virtual environment, emulating a RISC-V system on a computer with the x86-64 architecture. The performance difference was estimated for QEMU built with default options and with PGO enabled. The packages tested for building were chosen based on the assumption that they use different programming languages, and the amount of code corresponds to up to 6 hours of building in the emulator. The experiment further allowed them to increase the performance of the RISC-V platform build environments launched using the emulator. The build jobs that used to take a day were now completed almost 2 hours faster when using PGO and QEMU, which made it possible to perform 2 additional full builds daily on the same server. Canonical published the MicroCloud 2.1 Cloud Infrastructure Management Toolkit, which allows quick deployment of cloud systems and computing clusters with a shared distributed data storage and a secure virtual network on your hardware. MicroCloud 2.1 is the first LTS release. MicroCloud is designed as a snap package, including components necessary for managing the operation of cluster nodes. The toolkit is written in the Go language and is distributed under the AGPL 3.0 license. MicroCloud allows you to create clusters of 3 to 50 hosts with fault tolerance enabled, and from one host if fault tolerance is not required. The software stack for cluster management is based on the LXD toolkit, the Open Virtual Network platform for building virtual networks, and the Ceph distributed fault tolerance storage. LXD, Ceph, and OVN are configured automatically on all cluster nodes. The Ubuntu server distribution is considered as the main platform, but the toolkit is not tied to Ubuntu and can be used in any distributions where snaps can be installed. FreeCAD 1.0 has been published, which is distinguished by flexible customization options and functionality expansion through the connection of add-ons. The interface is built using the Qt library. Add-ons can be created in Python. Saving and loading models in various formats are supported, including STEP, IGES, and STL. The FreeCAD code is distributed on the LGPL v2 license. Open Cascade is used as the modeling kernel. Ready-made builds are prepared for Linux as AppImage, macOS, and Windows. FreeCAD allows you to play with different design options of a model. The project can act as a free replacement for commercial CAD systems such as CATIA, Solid Edge, and SolidWorks. Although FreeCAD is primarily intended for mechanical engineering and the design of new products, the system can also be used in other areas such as architectural design. The project has existed for over 20 years, and many years ago the developer community formed criteria that defined the functionality corresponding to the 1.0 release. The last 2 tests from that list were implemented in the presented version, solving the problem of topological naming and implementing a built-in module for designing the operation of prefabricated structures in assembly. GitHub has announced the GitHub Secure Open Source Fund, an initiative aimed at funding work to improve the security of open source projects. The first round will select 125 projects and invest a total of $1.25 million in them. Applications from maintainers for funding will be accepted until January 7th. Open source project maintainers who reside in regions where the GitHub Sponsors program is active are eligible to participate. In addition to $10,000 in funding, approved participants will receive 3 weeks of cybersecurity training, guidance and advice from the GitHub Security Lab team, and free access to GitHub security-related services, Copilot, AutoFix, Secret Scanning. The initiative is jointly funded by organizations and companies such as the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, American Express, ChainGuard, Hero Devs, Kraken, Mayfield Fund, Microsoft, 1Password, Shopify, Stripe, Superbloom, Vercel, and Zerodha. Linus Torvalds has accepted a change to the Linux kernel that removes the implementation of the Riser FS file system, which was deprecated last year and scheduled for removal in 2025. The change has been accepted into the branch that forms the 6.13 kernel, expected to be released in early February. The free implementation of the OpenGL and Vulkan APIs, Mesa 24.3.0, has been published. The first release of the Mesa 24.3.0 branch has an experimental status. After the code is stabilized, 24.3.1 will be released. Mesa 24.3 adds support for the Vulkan 1.3 graphics API in the ANV drivers for Intel GPUs, RADV for AMD GPUs, NVK for NVIDIA GPUs, TU for Qualcomm GPUs, the LavaPipe software rasterizer, emulator mode, and V3DV. Vulkan 1.0 support is available in the DZN and PanVK drivers. Mesa also provides full OpenGL 4.6 support for Iris, Radeon SI, Crocus, Zinc, LLVM Pipe, Virgil, Freedreno, D3D12, and Asahi. OpenGL 4.5 support is available for AMD and NVIDIA GPUs. OpenGL 3.3 support is available in the SoftPipe and NV50 drivers. The Linux Foundation Technical Advisory Board has announced that Kent Overstreet, the author of Bcache-FS, has been suspended from kernel development by not accepting pull requests during the 6.13 release cycle. The decision was made based on a recommendation from the Linux Kernel Community Code of Conduct Committee. The Max Interactive Desktop 2.2.0 desktop environment has been released. positioned as the first alpha release of a project attempting to recreate the IRIX Interactive Desktop SGI Indigo Magic Desktop user interface using Linux technologies. The development is being carried out under an agreement with SGI, which allows for a complete recreation of all IRIX Interactive Desktop features for the Linux platform. Installation instructions are available for Ubuntu, RHEL, Debian, Manjaro, and Arch Linux. The source code is published only for part of the components, and the other part is developed in private repositories available upon special request and including a mixture of proprietary code and code under various open licenses. At the same time, work is underway to open all the source code, rewrite the remaining proprietary code, and transfer the project to a community-controlled development model. All new code and rewritten old code are published under the BSD license. IRIX Interactive Desktop was originally shipped on SGI graphics workstations running the IRIX operating system, which peaked in popularity in the late 1990s and was produced until 2006. The Linux Shell Edition is implemented on top of the 5DWM window manager based on OpenMotif and SGI-Motif libraries. The environment is built using a modular architecture that uses microservices to separately execute desktop components. Desktop extension to several monitors, IDPI, UTF-8, and FreeType fonts are supported. RoxFiler is used as a file manager, PCMan FM is supported as an option, and a proprietary file manager is being developed, which is planned to be presented in the next release. You've been listening to Full Circle Weekly News. For more details, see the next issue of the magazine at fullcirclemagazine.org or check the links in the show notes. You can contact me at bardmoss@pm.me. I'll see you next week.